Business meeting. We'll start the business meeting with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. First item on our agenda is announcements. Councilors, are there any announcements? Hearing none. Next is recognitions and proclamations, and we have a proclamation. Vice Mayor Wade.
Yes.
You got...
You have to touch that. So this is a proclamation for the Soul of Seaville Festival that's taking place August 11th through the 13th. And it's whereas Soulville of Seaville is a celebration of Black excellence and culture in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. And whereas the Soul of Seaville seeks to reclaim the narrative surrounding some of the Charlottesville's darkest days by showcasing and elevating Black voices, art, entrepreneurship, music, food, and more. Whereas the Soul of Charlottesville is a collaborative effort with Frank X Art Park and various Black-owned businesses that seek to amplify the voices of local artists, performances, and community members. Now, therefore, the City of Charlottesville Council commemorates the Soul of Seaville Festival and encourages the community members to participate in the wide range of festival's activities beginning the evening of August 11th and ending the afternoon of August the 13th. Signed and sealed the 7th day of August 2023 by J. Lloyd Snook, the 3rd Mayor of Charlottesville. And so I think we have some representatives to come up if you'd like to say a few words. So if you want to take a picture and then someone can say something.
She's sitting right in front.
Yes, yours. If you'd like to say, please go to the mic so.
Good evening, and I first want to thank the community of the City of Charlottesville as well as Albemarle County. My name is Kalila Jones, and I am one of the original co-organizers of the Soul of Seaville and the creative director for some of the programming. I wanted to say that I really do appreciate this City Council for recognizing that there are some very fine people on both sides of the City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, and they happen to live in the Black community, and we want to give them a platform where we can celebrate, uplift, highlight, and elevate what they're doing as far as businesses, Black artisans, food, the youth. This year we're really focusing on the youth, and so I just really want to encourage you to come out and meet your neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's one other item of recognition is not on our agenda, but Friday afternoon we got the news that Daniel Fairley has been named to the Obama Foundation Leadership Program, one of 100 people nationwide. Daniel is the Youth Opportunity Coordinator focused on Black male achievement with the City of Charlottesville. It's a fascinating program, Obama Foundation Leadership Program, and should be really, I mean, first of all, it's quite an honor for him, but also I hope will enable him to make a lot of good connections with a lot of other similarly minded people, and it should redound to the benefit of all of us. So congratulations, Mr. Fairley. That's all for our recognitions and proclamations. Now let's turn to the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas, would you read the consent agenda?
Consent agenda, 2, minutes, June 20th, regular meeting, July 5th, joint council planning commission meeting, July 11th, joint council planning commission public hearing. 3, resolution appropriating city traffic assets insurance reimbursement, $56,316.53, second reading. 4, resolution appropriating funds for the Virginia Department of Education Special Nutrition Program Summer Food Service Program, $100,000, second reading. 5, resolution reallocating $33,827.85 of American Rescue Plan funds to the Department of Human Services from funds previously appropriated to City of Promise, second reading. 6, ordinance approving a right-of-way encroachment agreement for 1117 Preston Avenue, second reading. 7, resolution appropriating VDOT grant funds for Washington Park to Madison Avenue Trail, $285,665, second reading.
All right. So we'll now take public comment regarding the items on the consent agenda just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. If you're on the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you've joined by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, you may press *9. We'll alternate in-person and virtual speakers. And this is only to talk about those few items we just read off. Those of you who have pre-signed up, your moment will come in a few minutes. But for right now, we just need to get through the consent agenda. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on a consent agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone online who would like to speak on a consent agenda item?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands.
All right, so we will close the public hearing aspect of the consent agenda item consideration. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Payne. Any further questions or comments from council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion passes 5-0 to adopt the consent agenda. Mr. Sanders, is there a report from the city manager's office?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of things to run through. In place of our normal written report that's usually provided in the first packet of the month, since we did a big report in July, there being only one meeting, save the staff the stress of trying to pull that together again in short notice to be able to get another packet. So I do have a variety of things to run through. I'm going to start with council having indicated to me that there were a couple of community matters that had risen to your attention. You wanted me to find out what more I could in regards to what was going on with those issues. The first issue being some concern about an HVAC ongoing issue with residents and habitat properties in the city. I did reach out to Dan Rosenzweig, and Richard Trimley had a meeting with them and had a conversation in regards to what's going on in that situation and what it is that they have proposed to do at this moment. They're proposing to offer a $2,500 stipend to affected homeowners, basically concluding their ongoing support of what's happening in this situation. And I've advised that I would take a look at anything else that they wanted to provide, just to give the perspective of what they've been doing and what some of the comments and concerns have been from residents. I received a couple of letters from residents that are affected, expressed the concern that was there. We've agreed to meet further and have that conversation, and then officially bring back to you if there's any role for the city to play in an intervention of any kind. I don't know that there appears to be one at this moment, but if there is, then I will bring that back to you with the recommendation on what you might be willing or able to consider. But I just wanted to let you know that I did check into that particular situation. The other, and I know we'll hear more about this one this evening, is in regards to the proposed expansion of Dairy Central. I watched the video and became concerned myself. And as I've shared with you in the most recent weeks, as I've taken on this responsibility, that matters of the community are important matters to me. And as I watched the meeting, I became alarmed, so I'll share that with you all that are here to speak in this particular matter. There were a number of things that did not sit well with me as well. And I did reach out to Mr. Henry and had a meeting with him as well. I expressed those concerns, shared a lot of what I felt were fair criticisms that were directed to him for what had been presented that evening, how it was presented that evening, as well as what was being proposed. So I did share with him that I would definitely like to continue a conversation with him, as he has indicated he would continue to engage with the residents. And I look forward to hearing that the residents are feeling as though that line of communication remains open. And as he decides to move forward on his project, I've stressed to him that I do believe it is important for a community benefits agreement to be considered as something that would show that he can demonstrate that he is willing to hear the residents' concerns and express ways that he can address some of those various concerns. And again, I'll have further conversation with him and bring that back to you as well, looking for ways that the city can engage in that particular situation. Also wanted to provide you an update on public transportation since school is about to start. Everyone is a little concerned about how many buses will roll and whether or not their kids will have a seat on the bus. CAT is still in crisis mode. We labeled it that a couple years ago. It is still real. It is a situation that is a national crisis. There are bus systems all over the country having the same crunch. Today we are planning for 14 routes. That's the same as last school year. There are 12 drivers today with 2 relief drivers in place. We hope to be able to secure additional drivers, having extended offers to 6 drivers just recently. They are all in the background stage, so we hope that they will be coming out of that stage any day now, and then we might be able to add to the number of drivers that we have. And then we're working on the pipeline and continue to work on the pipeline. That's the project that we have set up with Network to Work at PVCC. We have 8 individuals in that program, and they're all in the background stage at this time, so we're optimistic that we could have all 20 seats filled sometime in the month of September. And while I'm talking about transit, I just want to take a moment to thank Jawan Lee. He is leaving the city, taking a job in DC. He's been with us for quite some time, and just want to acknowledge his contributions. His last day will be the 18th of this month. And on to other good news. I have good news to share with you all. Really it's more about me. It's good news for me. I have selected an interim deputy city manager for operations, so I'm very excited about this particular matter. Stephen Hicks, the gentleman sitting there in the front row, has been asked to join the city manager's staff, filling my seat. Stephen has been serving as a senior project manager in our engineering division of Public Works. But more importantly, Stephen has over 30 years of experience in state and local government, including time with VDOT. So he'll spend a great deal of energy working on all the many things that I used to come and talk to you about. But he'll have better answers, I'll tell you that now. Stephen previously served as a town administrator in Front Royal, Virginia, as well as a town manager of Selma, North Carolina. And despite his taking a break in local government leadership, he accepted my offer to join us on Wednesday, so I'm very excited about him coming this week to take a load off of this platter that I have been carrying for the past few days. And I spared him a moment of he doesn't need to speak to you tonight. He'll join Ashley at the next meeting, and he'll have a lot to say at that time. And in other good news, earlier today I appointed Michael Thomas, our permanent fire chief for the Charlottesville Fire Department. So Chief Thomas has served in the interim role since October. He's been a stabilizing force for the department, and I did ask the chief if he would say a few words, so I'll give him his moment.
Okay, check and make sure the clerk knows how to spell his name.
Mayor Snook, members of council, Mr. Sanders, and city staff, good evening, and I'll keep my comments brief. I'm humbled and excited about the opportunity to continue to lead the Charlottesville Fire Department as the fire chief. I've learned a lot over the last 10 months as in the interim role, and I'm committed to the community and equally committed to the department members. I appreciate the confidence of the city manager's office and the city manager for entrusting me to lead the department and its forward movement to success. I wanted to commend the members of the Charlottesville Fire Department for their dedication to service and their support. Again, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm humbled by the selection.
Thank you. And I would just like to add, I talked to a couple of people in the fire department in the last week or two, just completely unsolicited, and talking about the decision to be made, and every one of them expressed a great deal of support for you and basically said, tell the city manager that we got the right guy already. So, good news,
I heard that a few times.
yeah.
So the last item for me is just want to express what a great time I had at West Haven Days this past Saturday. Ms. Joy voluntold me to the food tent, so I got to serve fried fish for about an hour or so. It was an enjoyable experience. It took me back to my roots of community building and working in neighborhoods, so I really enjoyed that moment. I just want to thank all of the city departments who supported West Haven Days, and a special shout out to Sue and the DSS team for supporting the planning of the event, and Parks and Public Works for the logistics that they provided as well. Ashley. I think Ashley has a few additional items as well.
Congratulations, Chief and Mr. Hicks. Thank you, Mr. Sanders, and good evening, council and members of the public. I want to make sure that we congratulate not only Mr. Farley for his Obama Foundation Fellowship, but also our local teens who completed the KIP program during the 2022-2023 school year and the summer. The teens were celebrated at the Code Building with their family and friends on Friday, August 4th, and the program had a 98% success rate. Big thank you to the Department of Human Services team for including Annie Seacrest and Reggie Allen for their work to make sure teens in our community have paid internship opportunities. School year KIP signups will be open soon, so please keep an eye out for that if you have a teen in your life. And remember, they are paid internship programs. Finally, also please be aware for the public that Smith Aquatic Center will be closed for annual maintenance from August 19th through September 4th. Please know that the Aquatic Center passes will be honored at Carver Recreation Center during this time, and swim lessons and classes, recreational and lap swimming will be available at Crow Pool, which is located at Rose Hill Drive next to Walker Upper Elementary School. And Mr. City Manager, that ends my report.
All right, that is our report, Mr. Mayor.
And while we're talking about West Haven, a few of us wound up in the dunk tank. I know I went in 5 times. I don't know how many times they got you on, but Michael, were you also in the dunk tank?
Probably about 20 times.
So, on a day when it was about 92 degrees, going in the dunk tank was not the worst thing to be done.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I said a quick comment
Oh,
to
yeah.
follow up, Sam, for your comments about Habitat and the HVAC system. As you further your discussion with Habitat, it was a generous offer of $2,500, but I'm understanding from the residents that to replace the system is $6,000 to $10,000, and that it still will be a gap there, and it's been some pretty warm days, and the system haven't not been able to keep up. So thank you for your efforts with that, though.
and I noticed my, okay, sort of blinking at me, okay. The one thing I also wanted to point out was Mr. Sanders, having leaped into both the Habitat controversy and the dairy market controversy, basically as a mediator rather than as a decision maker, because none of these involve issues that are directly in front of the city at this point. But often mediation early on can forestall problems later on, and I appreciate the effort. It's not actually part of his job description, except in the general sense that the welfare of the city is in his job description. So. Okay, so now we come to community matters. We have 8 pre-registered speakers. We have 1 additional person on the wait list. That means we'll have 7 additional speakers on community matters. If some of these folks do not show up, we'll fill it out until we get to 16. But our rules specify we'll take 16 people on community matters at the beginning of the meeting. At the end of the meeting, there will be another opportunity where there'll be an unlimited number of speakers who want to speak at that point. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. If one of the first 8 speakers is unavailable, a speaker on the wait list will move into that slot. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. We'll now open the floor to pre-registered speakers. Our first pre-registered speaker is Deanna McDonald. Is she here? Or is she online? Oh, and if you come to the microphone, please.
She's coming around. She's
Okay.
in the back going.
I got you. I see now, yes.
My apologies for the confusion.
No problem.
I signed up for Miss Gloria Beard. I
Okay.
was looking for her. Here she is. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. My apologies.
Got to come up to the microphone. No, not until you start talking.
You're welcome.
Okay. It's my grandson. He follows
Could you
me.
pull the microphone down, Ms. Beard? Because we want to make sure the people online can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and my little speech is going to be about the dairy market, 10th and Page, and the surrounding neighborhoods. My name is Gloria Beard, and I live at 1116 Page Street. I've lived in my house 29 years and have lived in Charlottesville 50 years. My children were born here, but left after they became adults because there were no future for black males that was concrete at that time, 1977 to 1982. That's when my children were born. Charlottesville don't pay and didn't pay decent wages. Even I worked a full-time job plus part-time to make ends meet. And now I have a lot of health issues from having to work so hard. Now I want to know, why are all of these contractors allowed to come into Charlottesville to build these high-rise apartments and houses that cost an arm and a leg? The one I'm most concerned about is the dairy market and the lies that were told to our neighborhood. Chris Hendry told us that at the beginning he was going to set aside affordable apartments for people that didn't make high salaries. Well, he set aside 4, and the efficiency is $1,200. And they don't accept vouchers. They even want to raise the church that has, they even want to rent the church that has been in the neighborhood for $500 to $800 to be used for functions after telling the neighborhood association it would be used for children, functions, or seniors. To top this off, now he has told the Preston Plaza owners that they would have to move their business because he has purchased the plaza to build more apartments at a high price that none of us in this neighborhood can afford. And also our taxes went up when the first phase was completed. So how do you think this will affect the neighborhood when this happens again? You advertise for people to come to Charlottesville because it's such a wonderful place to live. For whom? We don't even have year-round shelters for the homeless, and the Salvation Army stays full with no available beds for emergencies. And I know that because I've called for people looking for somewhere to go. I feel that it's all about money and not people. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Beard. So our next speaker is Anna Mallow.
It's okay if I yield some time, correct? Okay. Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm here to talk about the upcoming special use permit application that will be for the expansion of Dairy Market. I want to start off by saying that I stand opposed to the new development proposed in the 10th and Page neighborhood, in alignment and uplifting the voices of residents of that neighborhood. I'm here to speak out about this issue because I see the future of this city going in a direction that prioritizes incoming new residents that are wealthy, white, professional workers instead of marginalized community members who have been living in this town for decades. There are many issues with this proposed development, but I want to start off with the hesitance that I have for Stony Point development. Stony Point has shown through their past actions with Dairy Market that they are not equipped to listen or fulfill the needs of community members in Charlottesville. Why believe Chris when he's been quoted in the media as saying he's going to do one thing and then just something completely different or doesn't do it at all? Why should we be giving an SUP to a person who has no stake in our community? Why should we be supporting a person who's worried about not making enough profit off this new development but can easily pay for multiple multi-million-dollar homes in the area? 10th and Page residents were quick to point out the lack of cultural incompetence by Stony Point Development. There were no Black people on the entire team. But this is indicative of a larger issue. Rich white landowners making unilateral decisions that negatively affect the future of Black community members who have been here for decades. It would make absolutely no sense for me to make decisions that affect 10th and Page because I do not live there. The second issue I have is pertaining to the economic impact of the expansion of residents of 10th and Page. We don't know what the expansion will look like, but if it's anything like the original Dairy Market, there's absolutely nothing affordable in that project. The smallest one-bedroom apartment in Dairy Market starts at $2,200 a month, which is high for rent. If it was 30% of my rent, it would be high for rent. That would mean if I could afford it, I would be making $80,000 after taxes. It's not affordable for someone who makes minimum wage, who makes $15. It's not even affordable for somebody who makes $40 an hour. If this is what the expansion looks like, how can we as a community say we're committed to affordable housing initiatives? I'm going to yield my time to Mr. Zinnia.
That's right. Go ahead, because you only have 45 seconds.
Oh, I'm done. Say whatever you want to say.
Hi, my name is Vazina Howard, and I'm with the 10th and Page Neighborhood Association. And Chris Henry came to us when they did the phase 1 and 2 and explained things to us, which she said how he told us lies, because nothing would stay the same. All right, now with the phase now, he had an open house for us to come and see it. But the thing about it wasn't where we could sit around and talk. We had to arrange that by ourselves, but we came in, I asked for chairs. They said they couldn't put down chairs because the architects didn't want chairs. They just wanted you to walk around and look at it and then leave. So that meant we didn't really get to give our opinion on anything or get to discuss anything until we called Chris to the side and had conversations with him. So that meant that they didn't include the neighborhood with any decision making as far as developing it or how things would be at all. So that's one thing we protesting against. Well, not really protest, but not liking, because they didn't include the neighborhood association in any of the plans at all. And then they also had black mural that they was going to put on the apartments, and they won't even rent to any Black people. They have really no Black workers other than the ambassadors that would clean up. But yet you was going to put Black women, they call them Black queens. Now, why would you even do that when you don't even support the neighborhood or the community that you're putting this up in?
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Time's up. Thank you. Next is Abby Guskind.
My name is Abby Guskin. I'm a Charlottesville resident, live on Ferris Street. Echoing what Anna just said, I don't live in 10th and Page community, so I can't make decisions, but I'm opposed to the Dairy Market building. I'm also disgusted and disgraced by what I've witnessed and what I've heard as far as Mr. Henry making shallow promises and promises that he hasn't kept to this community, nor will he. So I'm just expressing my concern, and I feel it's more about privilege to erect these high-rise buildings for people moving into the community, and surely changing the complexion of the neighborhood house by house, where it's already looming, as you all know, from West Main Street. Now they want to block it in on Preston as well, so the whole neighborhood will just be totally erased. And how is that respectful to the community members in 10th and Page? It's designed to continue to destroy the neighborhoods and suggest displacing people by raising their taxes out of their medium home incomes and not matching the houser to further displacement of low-income families. The insensitivity of private developers in general, like the ones particularly towards our Black residents. What will you do to ensure the taxes are not increased and these people in the community at 10th and Page are going to lose their homes, then where do people go? That's already happened in the past here in Charlottesville. The lack of thought to take away the neighborhood laundromat, well, that wasn't even in the meeting on the 25th. They all looked at each other like that, that what about the laundromat? Like, what about the neighborhood that's already using the laundromat? Where are they going to be able to use its services in local shops within distance? And that wasn't even a blip on the radar. None of this meets the needs of those who use the services. The dairy market, which you're well aware of, was in 2003 was already rezoned with additional density in Charlottesville, and in 2018, which wasn't a good idea either for extra height. Since then, the assessed value of the two phases has increased at least 5 times combined with assessments. That means what's going to happen is that the taxes are just going to keep increasing. And once again, it was already acknowledged that the one bedroom is $2,200. So right then and there, you already need more than $26,000 in your income just to be able to live. Forget about parking; that's additional. And if you have any furry creatures, that are with you, that's an additional cause. So the buzzword, once again, from this community is affordable housing. Affordable to whom? It's just an easy word for people just to use when they really don't want to discuss the real issues of people already struggling and not being able to meet the needs. When
Thank you,
asked
Ms.
by
Guskin.
community,
Your time is up. I'm sorry, your time is up.
I knew that you would remind me. So I was just hoping I was going to be able, because you could tell how nervous I am by I'm not a great public speaker. So I was hoping for a little bit, but thank you.
Thank you. Next is Donna Shaughnessy.
Hi, I'm Donna Shaughnessy, Mayor Snook and members of council and city staff. And congratulations, Mr. Sanders. And I'm so excited that you're the city manager. I'm here to change the subject for just a minute. I live on Birdwood Road in the city, and I'm here today representing both myself and the Piedmont group of the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club. As you might guess, I'm here to address the issue of the fuel choice for the upcoming change in the CAT fleet. I'm sure you don't need to hear any more scary stories about how dire the situation is climate-wise. I mean, we hear stories every day about how bad things are getting, and unprecedented heat waves and flooding. And even though our area is mercifully free from most of those impacts, that doesn't mean that we should ignore them and just move forward as if nothing's happening. So other folks will be speaking to this issue later this evening, and they are going to do a great job on a couple of issues. Marcia Geyer will address the significant flaws in the Kimley Horn study, and Bob McAdams of the Center for Peace and Justice will speak to the broader issue, as well as tying this description to the Climate Action Plan. So, as many of you know, I spent my entire career in local public transit, other than the 2 years I worked in city planning here at the city. And I'm well aware that communities of color depend on transit for many of their transportation needs. As a result, the routes are designed to serve their communities more often and with additional routes. We should all be concerned about adding more pollutants to these neighborhoods with fossil-fueled buses that pump out more carbon monoxide and other pollutants. If you add the major subsidies for clean fuel buses and the city's commitment to net zero, the decision to go electric is an even more sensible route. Let's ensure cleaner air for all of the city's residents. And thank you for all that you do for Charlottesville, and I'm looking forward to you all making the right decision and getting battery-powered vehicles for the fleet in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaughnessy. Next up is Robert McAdams.
My name is Robert McAdams, and I live at 2211 Williamsburg Road in the Albemarle County urban ring. In 2019, the City Council adopted updated greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals of 45% by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. Now the City Council is considering an alternative fuel study for the Charlottesville area transit system that basically says buy diesel-fueled buses now and start the transition to non-fossil fueled buses with the next fleet. Following that advice will delay the transition away from fossil fuels by 15 years. Following that advice will make reaching the city's goal of a 45% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 impossible. Every day this summer, we have seen news stories about unrelenting heat waves, ocean temperatures rapidly rising, wildfires and storms dropping a month's amount of rain in 48 hours. These are the effects of global warming that scientists have predicted for decades. For decades, governments at all levels in developed nations have kicked the can down the road, postponing the transition away from fossil fuels to some future date. You must not do that now. Time has run out for delays. You must begin the transition of the bus fleet away from fossil fuels now to have any hope of meeting your goal of a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. At this time, battery electric buses are the only real alternative. Yes, there will be practical problems to solve. Other cities have faced those problems, and the city staff can learn from the experiences in those cities. Please keep in mind the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by the year 2030 and start the transition now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAdams. Linda Abbey is next.
Sorry.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I feel like I'm a canary in the coal mine. I feel Charlottesville is a very special city. It's Jefferson's town. There are reminders of him and his time all over Charlottesville. People come here for that. I feel Charlottesville is beautiful. The neighborhoods, the mall, the parks, people take care of their gardens. It's green. There are trees everywhere. It's lovely to take a walk here or sit outside under the trees for lunch or dinner. You usually don't want to do that on West Main Street. Those buildings are only 6 stories tall. People here are kind and considerate. Drivers stop at crosswalks even before you set foot in the street. They screech to a halt. People are friendly. You say hello to strangers that you pass on the streets, and they even help you, like moving obstacles. I feel safe here. Charlottesville is full of art and music. There are great restaurants. The downtown mall is one of the few that's successful in this country, the few pedestrian malls. Charlottesville attracts retirees, artists of all kinds, and startup businesses. Unfortunately, retirees won't be riding bicycles to get where they want to go usually, although I did see one gray hair on a bicycle this morning. Also, most bikers have a car for inclement weather or longer distances. It might be a good idea to pay attention to sidewalk repairs. Yes, we have problems. Recovering from August 12th, building affordable housing. You have some very smart people who live in this area. You could tap them for ways to solve these problems. Habitat for Humanity seems to be doing something with affordable housing, and I think you need to think outside the box before you build these 9-story huge buildings. They don't even have 10% affordable housing in them, even though you say they're being built for affordable housing, and which destroy trees, create parking and traffic problems, and block sunlight from street levels, making it difficult for trees to live. Look at between the Omni and the Code building. The shadows prevent the trees from growing. Charlottesville streets are too narrow to support these tall buildings, at least downtown. I'm afraid that you are doing, and the building at 218 Market Street, which is 9 stories tall and wants to be even a bigger building, because they would increase the setback or decrease the setback at 45 feet, so it'd be one big block, huge. I'm afraid that you're doing this to increase the tax base, and that you give these projects over to developers, and that's greed. People need to start, please start thinking outside the box and get the public involved in planning the future of Charlottesville.
Thank you, Ms. Abbey. Time is up.
COVID had a huge effect on this lack of communication and information on all parts.
Thank you. Marcia Geyer is next. Is Marcia with us or online? Or?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Hi, I'm Marcia Geyer. I live at 420 Afton Pond Court, Charlottesville. I went into intensive fact-finding mode when I read Kimley Horn's document in the July 17th City Council agenda. Here's an overview of 4 major factual pillars for transit bus planning and decision-making: reliability, availability, climate action plan requirements, and funding. About reliability, in the 2012 the first American-made battery electric bus came on the market. It had big engineering flaws that caused frequent breakdowns and eventually a total waste of investment in them. Early adopters that trialed those buses included Richmond. That bus must not have been eligible for federal grants, based on the reports of millions of dollars lost. Every application for a federal grant for transit buses must include at least a passing performance grade on the Federal Transit Administration's Altoona test, which rigorously simulates how well a bus stands up to the tough duty cycle of transit buses. CAT can access and compare the eligible buses' Altoona scores. So the requirement for a reliable design is solved going forward. About availability, climate action requirements, and funding, electricity is the only transit bus fuel that produces 0 tailgate greenhouse gas emissions and is both available now and definitely will be for sale here in the next decade. California is using subsidies to corner future hydrogen fuel production out there on the other coast. Virginia's list of open state contracts that add 16% to the federal grant funding potential, getting it to 96%, limits the the selection of battery electric buses to 5 major manufacturers, which will somewhat simplify choices among the buses and their chargers. Still complicated. Among important mistakes in the non-discussed alternative fuel study document, the 3 graphs of changing fuel composition year by year are completely inaccurate. The huge diesel bus expansion in the early years showed in all 3 scenarios could not be exchanged soon for funded zero-emission replacement buses.
Ms. Geyer, your time is up. I'm sorry, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Richard Hunt.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, fellow Charlottesville residents. I am here to speak out about the dairy market expansion very clearly. As presented or as proposed, I oppose it. I'm very proud to oppose it, and I'm delighted to hear the thoughts of my fellow residents in the 10th and Page neighborhood. My home is at 801 West Street, and it's been there since 1905. My grandparents bought it in 1946. I was born here in 1956. I've got long, deep roots in this city. Some of the families in this room, I bet, were taught by my grandmother, who spent over 30 years teaching at Jefferson School and another 10 at Venable. I love this town. I love my house. I love my neighborhood. When I got the flyer that was sent to some of us regarding the dairy market, I said, oh no, not again. We've been through this. My uncles lost a business in Vinegar Hill. Now, I'm not someone who's opposed to economic development. What I'm for is smart economic development. What I'm for is economic development which is inclusive, not divisive. What I'm for is economic development that takes advantage and recognizes that Charlottesville is a city that depends on its diversity, and not just racial diversity, but economic diversity. And I'm in favor of looking at all projects which come before you, understanding what they mean for the city as a whole. And I'll give you an example. I also received in the mail not that long ago some information I didn't know, that the tree canopy in the 10th and Page neighborhood was terrible for a long time because of racial covenants, et cetera, and it's getting worse. And it's my understanding that the city is doing something about that because there are heat islands there. Why then would we turn around and say, oh yeah, bring in steel and concrete, 7 stories of it, block out the sun, and bring in more high density, when what we need, obviously, are trees and green spaces and places for the community to grow. What I suggest, and I recommend, and one of my fellow citizens said this earlier, that we take a step back and we look at what the community needs as a whole, and we think creatively, we think outside the box, and we not just succumb to another big building that's going to block out the sun and change the neighborhood the way all of my fellow residents have said. By the way, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. So the next person who had signed up as on our wait list, I guess we'll just call this the first person off the wait list, is Ziana Bryant. Ms. Bryant, are you here?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I know y'all can say it back. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. I'm talking to the counselors because they be acting like they can't say stuff back. But before I get started, can everyone who's here to support Respecting the Neighbors, that campaign in 10th and Page, please stand and make a little bit of noise? Wow. Oh, I have a lot of family and friends here tonight. I am so honored to stand here, not just because I'm giving a public comment, but because I'm standing on the shoulders of some real giants, some amazing, phenomenal Black women, starting with Thelma T. Hagen. I don't know if you know about that name, but as a city councilor, I would hope that you do. The 10th and Page Neighborhood Association is partly named after her. That's my great-grandmother. She also lived in our family's house on Anderson Street, which has now been in my family for 5 generations. So when I speak with passion and when I organize my folks, it's not just for myself. It's not just to make noise. It's because I believe that there's power when people are organized. And I know that I come from a lineage of people who would expect nothing less from me. Additionally, I stand on the shoulders of my Nana, who, please stand.
Yep.
Excuse me, is the neighborhood association president and has been so for over 10 years. So I grew up watching her organize the neighbors. I grew up watching her deliver cards and fruit baskets when families went through trying times, or delivering meals when new babies came to the world. And so when we talk about neighborhoods and we talk about community building, I see that from the people who raised me. I see that from my mom, I see that from my Nana, from my aunts, and from the other Black women who are in my family. And so I hold this space for them. Everything that I'm gonna say, you guys can watch on the Facebook live stream. Amanda was so kind to record the entire thing, and there's nothing new that I need to tell you, right? You guys know that there's a lack of diversity. There's a lack of diversity on this council, right? We have Juan Diego Wade, we have Ms. Prayer, lovely people, but we don't have enough youth Black voice here at these meetings or in our public elected bodies. And so there's nothing that I can tell you tonight that you don't already know. But what I will tell you is that when you look out there and you see hundreds of people here in various public meetings, on our listserv, on our social media, know that we're not gonna be quiet. And we'll see you at every meeting until you have to vote on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Next, is there anyone online who is waiting to speak to us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, Robin Hoffman.
Ms. Hoffman, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Yes, hello, everybody. And first of all, I want to thank very much Ashley Marshall. She's been amazing. I emailed her at 5 o'clock in the morning because that's when I get up. And she answered my email like in 15 minutes. But what I want to say is we spent a long time on Friday last week talking about a grant, an ARPA grant, that wasn't really communicated to the other artists and engaging community members. But what Ashley did was she gave me sort of a structure for, she spent a lot of time. Anyway, what I want to say is that I'm sorry, first of all, I did not attend I did not attend the West Haven this year. I was invited by 2 organizations to do caricatures. The Botanical Gardens set up a booth, and also OSR, which is the Open Source Recycle. I landed up going the next day to the 12th and Rosewell Church and learned so much about the need for solar on the churches. They need a lot of support. They are supporting the neighborhoods there. The people there have been doing this for generations. And so I want to give them a shout out for everything they do for the communities there. And I learned a lot because I helped with some food distribution and just met a lot of people. And so I just want to say that. The farmers market at Mead Park Art Park also opened up avenues in my conversations with communities to possibly open up another farmers market at Tonsler Park, Art Park. And I felt like this could be something that the grants would, it's supposed to be a pop-up grant, the ARPA. So what happens is if you have like poetry reading or whatever, it could be a pop-up like Tom Tom. And you could do it at the farmers market like twice a year, you know, and that way you could get $10,000 for your pop-up. And there are other grants too that are coming down the pike, as Ashley informed me, supposedly to enhance the city. It's coming in September. So I hope that you could distribute that. And then also I counted all the bus shelters in the city. And they're hard. I couldn't find any. I mean, there was like 5. So when you were talking about transportation earlier, I didn't hear anything about that piece. And I hope very much that you consider, it's about $2,000 from Amazon to get a bus shelter and $6,000 for any other. And I'm sure we could raise the money for that, because the most important thing is that we get solar on the churches, solar on the buildings, and we get transportation where people can go to work, because they can't afford a car. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll come to somebody in the room. Mr. Gathers?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, council. Good evening. I'm back. Mr. Saunders, congratulations. Chief Thomas, congratulations. I stand this evening in concert of opposition to the dairy market with future Governor Bryant. All of you as elected officials, other than Ms. Puryear, ran on some sort of platform regarding affordable housing here in Charlottesville. It's time for you all to uphold that commitment and that promise. These proposed monstrosities will only go towards furthering the changing of the fabric of the neighborhood. I told you years ago when this happened that it would directly impact the taxes on the residents in the neighborhood, and received various assurances that it wouldn't happen. It did. This just leads to displacement, gentrification, marginalization, and the further evacuation of black folks from the city of Charlottesville. It's an excavation that's going on for some strange reason. Maybe someone can explain that to me. What this is just, it's Jim Crow 2.0. And I urge you, I encourage you individually, when this comes before you, do as Nancy Reagan said, and this may be the only time you'll hear me agree with Nancy Reagan, just say no. Just because millionaires come in with their pockets down to their ankles doesn't mean that we have to give a nod and a wink to them every time they come with their hand out. We've seen how that happens. As Brother Malcolm said, we were lied to, we were hoodwinked, we were bamboozled. I urge you, don't let it happen again, and don't let it happen to the residents of the 10th and Page neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gathers. Next, is there anyone online?
We have Bill Emery.
Mr. Emery?
Good evening.
Good evening.
You guys there?
Yep.
As you later this evening refer the zoning ordinance rewrite to the Planning Commission for their recommendation, I'd like to address the community engagement statement in the staff report, which phrases the quote, well, extensive community engagement over the entire time period of the CVille Plans Together process. You know, there have been many opportunities for engagement throughout the CVille Plans Together process. Like Director Freeze has made a heroic effort talking to neighborhood associations, but neighborhoods without neighborhood associations, the engagement hasn't been directed to those property owners and residents most profoundly affected. There hasn't been any directed engagement. In the Woolen Mills, which doesn't have a neighborhood organization, I'm thinking about the 100 modest affordable homes that have been rezoned as RB. These blue collar workers, these residents are worthy of direct contact from the city, a phone call, a letter. Additionally, in the Woolen Mills, the rights acreage, which 2 years ago was designated in the future land use map as neighborhood mixed use node, that property has modest houses next to it. Now, I'm not aware that any of the people that live next to it or the owners of the rights property have been directly engaged by NDS or Roadside Harwell in an attempt to solicit their input, developing the new zoning. Now, at your July 5th, I think it was a work session with Planning Commission, the mapping logic, which turned neighborhood and mixed use everywhere else in the city to Index 3 was abandoned. And you guys were talking about 10-story buildings on that rights property. Oh, it's just a junkyard. It's in a hole. You really need to talk to people who are directly affected by the proposed zoning changes, the owners and the residents that are going to take the brunt of this. They have not been contacted by the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emery. Next, anybody else here in person who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, counselors. My name is Elaine Poon. I use the pronouns she, her. I am the Deputy Director of Advocacy at the Legal Aid Justice Center. I understand that this is not before the council tonight, but it seems to be the topic of conversation. I am here to answer the call from the community to speak out against the dairy market along Preston Avenue. Our Executive Director, Angela Ciolfi, was unable to make it tonight, but this statement is written by her and as well as me, and it is made on behalf of the Legal Aid Justice Center as an entity whose mission will be impacted by the proposed development along this corridor. We also speak in full support of the neighbors, many of them who are here, those who live there now, but also those who have been forced out of their homes because of skyrocketing rents, because of turnover in ownership, because of massive tax bills that result in long-standing institutional racism in housing in this town. In the early 2000s, the Legal Aid Justice Center, we went and looked for a home with the explicit intention to be embedded in the community that we served and to be accessible to low-income clients. First, we fled West Main Street. Then we fled the downtown mall to escape the rapid influx of expensive shops and restaurants that our clients could not afford. In 2003, we found the Preston Avenue location. It was perfect. It's on a bus line. It's within walking distance of 10th and Page. It's in walking distance of Rose Hill, Grady, Venable neighborhoods. It has parking for people who are coming from Albemarle, Fluvanna, Louisa, and Green to come for their appointments. It was also symbolically important to be embedded among so many landmarks that are important to the history of the Black community here in Charlottesville, including the C.B. Holt Rock House, Washington Park, Trinity Church, and others. The dairy market's renovation has already undermined many of the reasons we moved to this location. We have seen rapid displacement of Black residents in nearby neighborhoods. Street parking has disappeared. We are now renting from a church down the street so that we can make sure that our clients have parking when they come for their appointments. There are virtually no affordable lunch options for our staff within walking distance, and this expansion will make things worse. Obviously, the biggest loss for our institution, though, is what we are realizing, what we are asking our clients to walk through, the space that they must move through, a space that was clearly not built for them. To imagine that our clients who may be facing homelessness and eviction must now ride or walk past outdoor patios serving $30 plates, high rises charging over $2,000 for a 560 square foot apartment, the psychological impact of having to deal with that as you walk through. And then now layer on the residents who have been growing up washing their clothing at Preston Suds, the ones who grew up going to Trinity Church on Sundays, the sense of loss that someone feels to have to walk through those kinds of new developments that just deepens the distrust that they already have with having to deal with an institution like the so-called justice system to try to access a lawyer at LAJC.
Thank you, Ms. Boone. Your time is up.
Thank you. I urge you to listen to Black voices and longtime residents as you move through this process and oppose the dairy market.
Somebody online?
We have Salethia Carr.
Ms. Carr?
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good day to you all. My name is Salethia Carr. I'm a founder and CEO of Not Me, I Believe. I'm a community organizer with FAR, and I am a member of the Charlottesville Low Income Housing Coalition, CLIC. My concerns for my community is seeing the continued displacement of our community families in the so-called sensitive areas, which include a lot of Black and brown residents. For many years, there has been a decrease in African Americans here. The expansion of Dairy Market looks just like a repeat of 1967. This is unfair, and our community is being bullied. Now, why should we be boxed in like animals? Because that's what I'm looking at. From Main Street to Preston Avenue, we're going to be boxed in. This is cruelty. The homes in our areas should be preserved. Please say no, and I mean no, no, no. If this proposal comes to you, we need you to show that you all care about your community, our community, and its history. We don't need any more dairy markets. They are eliminating this history of our community. This ain't right. And this community has been cheaply taken from many African American families weighed in. The Charlottesville Low Income Housing Coalition, CLIC, will be coming to you with the results of a petition that we drafted I think it was last month, before this proposal even came up. One part of the petition says that we need your support to prevent further displacement in low-income neighborhoods. So I've heard from a lot of people, we have heard from a lot of people, and they in these so-called sensitive areas, and they don't want it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr.
Uh.
Now we have one more from here in the room. Let's see. Well, first one up.
Good evening, Mayor Snook, members of City Council. My name is Sandra Avalos Poe, 617 West Main Street. And I wanted to share a few recommendations today on school transportation. I also want to say that I 100% support the Respect Our Neighbors campaign. I think that it's beautiful and powerful to see so many people out to support the Black and brown community. Transportation is another subject that it has continued to affect the Black and brown community. And we are going to share a few recommendations with, we have shared recommendations with School Board on August 3rd, and we plan to share them on our upcoming webinar in partnership with Livable Seaville on August 10th. You can sign up for the webinar on our website, charlottesvilleunited.org, under the tab that is News and Events. We've developed these recommendations based on interviews with bus drivers, conversations with families in school pickup lines, focus groups with caregivers and community stakeholders, and joint exploration with the Community Solutions Clinic at UVA Law. We're recommending the following 6 items as items that we would like to see happen immediately. Number 1, adjust compensation to ensure sufficient number of bus drivers. Number 2, increase communication with bus drivers, applicants while in process. Number 3, ensure CAP provides a monthly update to the City Council on school bus driver numbers. Number 4, launch a monthly walk, bike, and bus to school day for city schools to engage the local community in ensuring safe transportation for our students and families. This will also raise the visibility of the needs for safer transportation. Number 5, ensure transportation planning prioritizes safe routes to schools. Number 6, increase frequency and reliability of specific public CAP bus routes that transport to and from CHS, Buford, Walker, to align with school schedules. And the following 3 items are in the medium to long term. Number 1, transition ownership to school transportation to Charlottesville City Schools. Number 2, determine if a full-time role is needed to attract or retain bus drivers at Charlottesville City Schools. And number 3, conduct a long-term transportation and facilities plan to account for population growth and changes. This could also include studies on smaller and/or electrical buses. Thank you so much for your time and attention to these recommendations. We appreciate you listening to our community voices. Thank you.
Thank you.
So are those on your site? Can you get those to us?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, of course.
council@charlottesville.gov.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, and then we have one more from online. Do we have anybody else online?
Yes, Mayor Snook, we have Chris Meyer.
All right, Mr. Meyer?
All right, good evening, councilors, mayor, and city staff. I'll be making similar observations on unfortunate lack of school bus drivers. I hope you're also doing very well. Well, I'm heartened that we have a new higher management positions filled with excellent people. I am dismayed to learn that we once again do not have enough school bus drivers. Kind of feels like Bill Murray's Groundhog Day every August. I do not have a direct solution, like CUBE just presented, on how to hire enough school bus drivers, but an indirect manner might be to hold all management accountable who school bus drivers fall under. I wonder if all management who touch this issue could not get higher than an average performance rating on their annual reviews would solve it, unless they had enough school bus drivers. Another solution could potentially be maybe no pay raises for those managers until the school bus driver positions are fully staffed for 3 months. City management gets paid to solve these problems like this, and it's time for them to solve it. Louisa County has done it according to a report done by UVA law students for Charlottesville United for Public Education. So we know it can be done. I appreciate all the hard work and passion city workers bring to their jobs to make the city a great place to live. My ask is that you sharpen their focus to solve this perennial problem so all the Charlottesville youth who need a ride to school actually get one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. So that concludes our first round of community matters. We've had 16 speakers. If there are other folks who wish to speak, I will tell you that there are 3 items on the agenda between now and the next time that we will have community matters. You're welcome to stick around. You're welcome to go home and phone in or Zoom in or whatever. There is no limitation on the number of speakers who speak to us at the end. So thank you all for those who have been Community Matters participants.
Would it be possible, appropriate, just to briefly respond to the
Sure.
subjects raised? Just one quickly with the buses, that decision is going to happen in October at the earliest, correctly, just so for the public timeline? Or like, what is the timeline for us making a decision about the alternative fuel study?
Right now, it's tentatively scheduled to be coming back to you in October, but that's still to be worked out as we continue to get feedback. We have additional things to look at, but that's the plan, is that we'll be able to do that.
Yeah. And then just other quickly, just wanting to acknowledge, the amount of people out here engaged on the topic of Dairy Central. I know this isn't new information for a lot of people, but for the city, we're going to be several months, there would be a special use permit that can come to us that we can vote on. And I think that does put us in a position where we are able to say yes or no based on if we decide if there are adverse neighborhood impacts and if there's a community benefits agreement that's legally binding that addresses those. So that's many months away, but that is a decision we can make. And the other is the zoning right now, they could build by right without the city, 4 stories, less density. And I think it's really important that in our draft zoning rewrite, this area will be CX5 and CX7, I believe, which is 10 to 7 stories by right. And that means you wouldn't need to come before the city council for a yes or no vote. So this conversation couldn't even happen. What would be different is you'd be required to have at least 10% of units affordable at 60% AMI. But that will be a fundamentally different situation. It will mean all along Preston and our other commercial corridors like East High, along West Main, by right, there will be heights up to 10 and 12 stories. And we know that that will mean that developers will buy up multiple lots, consolidate them, and build developments like this. Unlike now, they will be required to have at least 10% affordable. But that's a very, very important conversation happening right now. And so I think it's just really important for everyone to be engaged and let us know, is that the vision you have, or do you want something else? So.
Okay. Any other comments from councilors? Okay, so let us move on then to the action items. The first action item is referring the zoning ordinance rewrite to the Planning Commission. Mr. Freeze?
Good evening, Mayor Snook, members of council. My name is James Freese. I'm the Director of Neighborhood Development Services. The item before you this evening refers the zoning rewrite project. This is the third part of our overall CVOL Plans Together effort. Refers that to the Planning Commission for a public hearing and then a recommendation back to you. This action tonight is a requirement of state law and our existing zoning code, which require that that council refer these items to the city council, or I'm sorry, to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has 100 days to get back to you with a recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions on that process.
Did you say 100 days?
Yeah, Planning Commission has 100 days to get back to you guys with their recommendation.
So just one question, just for the public's benefit.
Sure.
And just in terms of process and timeline, what will that look like in terms of Planning Commission will make a decision, give it to us, and then we would assume have work sessions, vote on it, and that's kind of the process?
The way the process works is that the Planning Commission will conduct a public hearing. They then need to make a recommendation. They will need to vote on a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council will also conduct a public hearing, and then you will have the opportunity to ultimately vote on the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And is this still hopefully to get done before the end of the year?
The objective remains to get this done before the end of the calendar year, yes.
And when is the next draft expected?
We are,
any day now?
We are really at the point of any day now. We are expecting it this week. I will say that we are working through that last couple of issues, trying to make sure that we have this thing buttoned up so that everything is ready to come to the Planning Commission and Council.
Okay. Councilors have any other clarifying questions? Discussion?
It's going to be a busy fall.
Going to be a busy fall, that's right. So, this is simply a resolution, is not a public hearing. Is there a motion?
Yes, I would move the resolution referring adoption of the Charlottesville Development Code, zoning and subdivision ordinances to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, special use permit request at 207 and 211 Ridge Street. Matt?
Mayor, City Council, Matt Alfley, City Planner, Neighborhood Development Services. Tonight you'll be voting on a SUP for 207, 211 Ridge Street for the expansion of the Salvation Army for a shelter care facility and alterations to setbacks and parking requirements. This came before Planning Commission at a joint public hearing on July 11th. There were 6 members of the public who spoke. They spoke in favor of the overall development, but had concerns as it related to trash and parking. At that meeting, parking was a big conversation, especially during construction, as service is going to continue as the site expands. After the Planning Commission meeting, to address this issue, the staff has recommended an additional 10th condition to add to the 9 that are in the resolution that speaks to adding a construction access management plan for during the construction. The applicant is here tonight and can answer questions along with staff, but with that, I will turn it over to City Council.
I have one question. I think I may know the answer, but I'm not sure. This is listed as one reading. Is this technically the second reading?
This is just a resolution, unless the joint public hearing with City Council, Planning Commission counted for the public hearing, so it's a resolution, just one reading.
Okay, maybe I'm remembering the conversation then from the Planning Commission meeting. I'm curious as to why this gets one reading and the next special use permit gets 2 readings.
I think there was just a clerical error on the second one. So ordinances typically have your 2 readings, but resolutions are only 1 reading.
Okay. All right, so 1 reading. Any questions for Mr. Alfley?
I guess the first suggestion or request is I'd like to move the adoption of this additional condition to the resolution, and then we would vote on that amended resolution. So I guess what I need to do, help me out here, I'd like to move to amend the resolution with the conditions that are listed there in the packet and which were discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, with this additional note. This condition: the applicant will provide a construction access management plan. At minimum, the plan will include measures to ensure safe vehicular and pedestrian access along 4th Street Southwest and Dice Street during construction. The plan will be subject to approval by the Director of NDS and must be detailed within the final site plan.
So that would be, I'm sorry.
No, is that a motion?
I'm moving to amend the resolution to include that additional condition.
Do we need to move the resolution first to put it on the table and then amend it?
I think you're doing it the right way.
Asking our city attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be appropriate to consider Mr. Pinkston's motion to amend the resolution, and then if that motion passes, council will consider the amended resolution. So
Okay,
I do
so-
believe it would be appropriate for Mr. Pinkston's amendment to be voted on first.
So the resolution, the conditions that are listed on page 55 and 56 of our packet, 9 different conditions. This would be the 10th condition? Is that-
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's to be responsive to comments we heard in the,
Right,
in that
yeah.
meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion of that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is, if I'm hearing it correctly, addressing the safety concerns about walking. The neighbors came to talk about the ability to get into their residences and walk from point A to point B, and adequate parking for them and/or the employees. Am I right?
It's specifically during the construction period.
Right, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, those issues were expressed, and your amendment is addressing those issues, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so first we are voting on amending the resolution. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No? Okay. So the motion passes. Now is when, next step is to approve the special use permit as amended with the now 10th condition. Is there a motion on that?
Yes, I would move the amended resolution with the 10th condition, granting a special use permit for the property located at 207 and 211 Ridge Street, tax map parcel 29002900.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Again, I plan to vote for it. This is really out of curiosity. There's the S3 screening along like the boundary with the neighborhood. What does S3 mean, and is that generally in line with kind of what like a relatively meaningful, like, condition to build something like large trees to create like a barrier would be, or I just have no idea what that means. I'm
Yeah, so
curious.
S3 is the densest barriers of our screening barriers, S1, S2, and S3. So S3 is the most dense. The one caveat is S3, you can, at the discretion of the director of NDS, provide a fence to be completely opaque if it's appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. That's it for me. Okay.
Other questions, discussion? So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item, approving a special use permit at 218 West Market Street, second reading. Mr. Freeze?
All right. Good evening again, Mayor Snook, members of council. Again, for the record, my name is James Freese, Director of Neighborhood Development Services. I understand there was a presentation on this item at the last meeting, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm simply going to note that there is an additional condition that was proposed by the applicant in this case to limit the size of the building to the existing approved plans. So despite the reduction in the step backs, the overall square footage of the property will remain the same. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I also have with me my colleague Carrie Rainey to answer questions about the project itself.
All right.
So that would, foreclose about another 5,000 square feet? Was that the?
That is correct, yep.
Which is basically being taken up by those shafts to provide light and air.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, the effort here was just really to achieve a better designed building, which allows light and air to those interior units.
And that is responsive primarily to my suggestion that nobody could answer a couple of weeks ago, which was, are we effectively giving him X number more square feet that he can now turn around and sell? And Mr. Levine is saying, nope, not going to do that.
Yes, sir.
And willing to be bound by that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
The affordable units that were listed, that will remain the same, Mr. Freeze?
It does remain the same, yes. It is notable that the affordable units that are associated with this project are above and beyond what is required by our existing ordinance and above and beyond what was required at the time the project was approved.
And they continue to be in contact with their next-door neighbor at the Vinegar Hill Theater, particularly as it relates to summer classes with the youth to ensure their safety?
My understanding is the owner did reach out to the neighbor, that they had a meeting and talked through issues there. I don't, Carrie, do you have anything to add on that point? No? That is my understanding.
So, Mr. Freeze, you finished?
Yes, sir, I am.
The resolution that we're looking at in our packet includes the revised step back condition. This is what they're requesting.
I believe we need to do, as we did in the last meeting, I believe there needs to be an action taken to add that resolution, that item into the resolution, as was done in the last item. I apologize, not the last meeting.
Yeah.
Because it was not part of the discussion at the planning commission. It needs to be added in.
You're talking about the step back or the square footage?
The square footage, the condition.
Sorry. The resolution as presented covers the step backs.
Yes.
Okay.
But the additional condition to limit the square footage to what was approved in the prior site plan does need to be added into that resolution.
Okay.
Just as was done in the last item.
Okay, so if there is interest in adding that condition, our first motion is to add that condition to this resolution.
All right. Do we have any desire to hear from the applicant before we do all this, or we all pretty much know how we're going to vote?
Anybody? I guess not. I mean,
It was pretty, I think we heard this at a joint meeting with the planning commission, but
And then, well, we had our own meeting, it took about an hour, we were
Okay,
talking
I know
about
it
it,
was,
so.
it was a lot of meetings, so.
It was in the same room.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So, but anyway, it was pretty robust discussion.
And for whatever it's worth, I'll just say, the limitation on the square footage does not address the concerns I had, and quite frankly, I don't even see a need to place that condition, but that's just my perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote against the condition. I don't see that 5,000 square foot on a building of this size makes, I don't, to me, if it's a better project, it's a better project, so.
So is there any,
Brian, I don't understand what you just said. You lost me. I was with you.
I think that what they've done with, and this is the way design works, is you sort of start off with a big lump of clay, and then over time, you sort of massage it, and then as you get further and further along, you do your design development, and I think that they got to a point where they thought they were gonna be at the start. As they've gotten into this, it's become more refined, and the changes in the step backs, the main reason I think they're doing it, I believe them, is to come up with a better project with better rooms and layout. As a result, they're getting 5,000 square feet. I don't see, and I'm open to people helping me see otherwise. I don't see what restricting them from having that extra 5,000 square feet, what that does for the city or for anybody. I mean, it means that there's less money that they can make on their property, which I can appreciate that, I guess. But anyway, I don't see the point.
It's also unusable space, so
Well,
it's just a walk. I mean, they're not gonna use it to make more apartments.
well,
they'll use it for something.
Right.
Well, they-
It won't be apartments.
Probably
it
not.
could be larger apartments.
Right, and
I just
there's
don't.
no to relitigate it, but again, my concern was the number of affordable housing and AMI level and whether that
Right.
meets our community's expectations, and
Right.
the square footage, quite frankly, doesn't really even
Doesn't play
deal
into
with that.
That's why I asked the question about the affordable units. See here?
So
Right.
is there a need to consider this amendment or not?
Well, I mean, I think that the amendment, I'm suspecting that the amendment was a response to my comment last time that basically that they were getting an advantage, getting something in a sense for nothing, or to put it another way, I mean, I used a phrase perhaps more colorfully than accurately to talk about a bait and switch, which we have sometimes seen in other projects where I think it clearly has been a bait and switch. You negotiate, basically the granting of the first special use permit is not the end of the negotiation, it's the beginning. And I should not have used that particular phraseology here simply because I don't really have any suggestion that that's what Mr. Levine is doing, but that's what that's always my fear. That's always my fear when negotiations continue after you think you've got a done deal. So, anyway.
So Brian, I just to make it crystal, so you're saying you don't support the amendment, which will give them the space to bring in more lighting to make it more aesthetically pleasing. You say you're not supporting that proposal?
I'm saying the amendment limits the total amount of square footage by about 5,000 square feet. And I don't see a reason to add a limitation to that.
They're still going to be able to do the design that
Yeah.
they've got, that they were suggesting.
What
This
does it-
was just an attempt, I think, to address my rhetorical point from 2 weeks ago.
Does that make sense, Ms. Long? Yeah. Does that make sense to you, Juan?
Yeah.
So is there, I'm not hearing any support for that particular amended or additional condition. All right, so then the next vote is on the motion is on the resolution to approve or deny the special use permit.
Yes, I would move the resolution approving the special use permit for property located at 218 West Market Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I understand the particular history of this one, but I think tonight's just a clear example of we have to think outside of the box in terms of I think, what many people in the community are expecting in terms of affordability and developments, and how widespread the attitude is that developments like this are not trickling down to benefit everybody. I do understand the particular history here, but I think it's something we have to continue to think and kind of challenge our status quo on. But
And I appreciate that.
Ms. Purdy, any thoughts?
Just wish there could be more affordable units, but I understand, given the number of units in the building, there is a limit to how many we can have. And I heard the developer and the architect saying they were doing a couple of more than they are required to do, but I wish there could be more.
All of which highlights the importance of passing a good, strong zoning ordinance. So, but that's not going to enable us to go back and redo this one. So, all right. Ready to vote? We don't really have buttons to push or anything.
I just gotten used to them. Yeah.
So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
no.
Okay. Motion passes 4-1. All right, we have 2 items, that's the end of our action items. We have 2 written reports. The Land Use and Environmental Planning Committee semi-annual report, which was, it's a written report. It is not an oral presentation here, unless there's somebody who is expecting to make a presentation on it. I don't think that's the case. And then we also have the quarterly report from the Rivanna authorities. Is there any questions for follow-up regarding either one of those written reports?
No questions, but I'll just note for the benefit of the public, it's very interesting that the Land Use and Environmental Planning Committee used to be a meeting that was open to the public, and it's been a couple years now since that was closed to the public, and even myself as a counselor would be unable to attend. So there is no public body which any member of our council or the public can attend to take part in UVA's decisions about their future land use and development. And that's quite interesting. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so if there's no questions for follow-up regarding the written reports, let me turn next to other business, any other business items for consideration. Or councilors, any questions for the city manager to follow up on? Hearing nothing, we are now at the final speaking opportunity for members of the public. Speakers will be given up to 3 minutes again. Join the speaker queue by selecting the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar, or *9 if you're by phone, or by raising your hand in council chambers. We'll alternate between in-person and virtual speakers. Are there any in-person speakers who wish to address us at this point? Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Peter Reitmeyer. I attended the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission meeting Wednesday, July 26th, chaired by Mr. Pinkston. It was a very good presentation on how various VDOT funding mechanisms are awarded by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. One of your employees, Sandy Shackelford, did a really good job. It was quite educational. And I'd recommend that if you haven't had a chance to see it, you take a look. It explains, she explained in a really clear way a very difficult process. And I bring up this topic because this council approved the 170 unit, 240 Stribling development almost 15 months ago in April of 2022. More recently, you approved the 2005 JPA project. And when you count up the vehicles that are projected to be in those 2 developments, you're going to add about 400 vehicles to the local JPA extended traffic area. That's probably going to add up to about 1,000 additional daily trips. Yet when I looked at the city website on July 14th, on the transportation project list, it doesn't even indicate that the Transportation Department is studying the effect of the traffic on JPA that's coming as a result of those two developments. Now, this is 15 months have gone by. I'm just curious when they're going to actually start studying that issue. They are studying the sidewalks on Stribling. I'll give you credit for that, but there's nothing that's going to happen to the actual vehicles on JPA. That's not good. And so when I sort of learned how the funding is provided, smart scale, maintenance money, the rest, those projects are hard to get. You have to apply for them, you have to be accepted, you go through several rounds of culling by the local district, and then you compete with other districts in the state to get this funding. And the reality is, if you use something like smart scale funding, you're going to be 5 or 6 years out before you ever get any money for it. So think about that. I mean, if you get these big developments going in, and I'm not anti-development, I'm just saying, if you get it, let's make sure we have the infrastructure so that we're not equitably all stuck on JPA not going anywhere. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Reitmeyer. Okay, anyone online who would like to speak to us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, we have James Bryant.
Mr. Bryant?
Good evening, Mayor Snook and fellow council members, and Mr. Saunders. How are you all this evening?
Great.
Good. Well, I'm here to join the chorus of others who live in the 10th and Page Street area in regards to the Dairy Market project. I have been a resident of the 10th and Page Street neighborhood for nearly 70 years. I grew up in this neighborhood. I've seen a lot of changes. One of the things that many people may or may not know about this neighborhood is full of rich history. It's full of folks who were entrepreneurs. I think about the Bowes, Juanita and George Bowes, who owned a restaurant on West Street. I think about Mr. Robinson, who owned an upholstery shop on Anderson Street. I think about Dr. Coles, who had a dental office on 8th Street. I think about Johnson Brothers Funeral Home on 8th Street. I think about the teachers who lived in this community, who so inspired me to become an educator. I think about Washington Park. Long before TikTok and Facebook and FaceTime, that was a gathering place. Even before I was born, many of the famous stars came to Washington Park to perform. As a child growing up, that was our social time to meet with friends and socialize. I think about the bakery. We could smell the fresh bread being baked while in the park, while in Washington Park. We go in the next day to pay 5 cents for day-old bread. There's a lot of rich history. But also, fast forward in 2023, I think about those of us who are getting up in age and the elders who live in the community and how they are struggling to keep up with the change, the gentrification of the neighborhood. No one speaks, no one knows each other, unlike it was as a child. I think about those people who rent, the renters who are not really invested in the neighborhood. And they'll say to their renters, oh, my taxes are going up, so I'm gonna have to go up on your rent. Many of these people make nowhere near the money that you and I make. And it's tragic. And I'm hoping that, and I'm hoping that when this dairy market phase come to your desk, that you all will think deep and hard to vote no on this project. And I am hoping that it will not become a tale of two neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Okay, next, somebody here who would like to speak? Yes?
Hi, hello. My name's Althea Lonworell. I've lived in Charlottesville my entire life. I was born here at the old Martha Jefferson Hospital. And it's honestly very upsetting to see these proposed plans for the expansion of the dairy market, especially considering that the city has continued to push out long-term, lifelong residents of the city. This expansion will do nothing but continue this legacy of pushing out people, specifically Black people and other minorities who have come to Charlottesville. It is unfortunate that there are people like Chris Henry who feel that they are enough a part of this community, that they are building onto it, when really all they are doing is detracting from it and making it so that this city is unlivable for those of us who have lived here our entire lives. I've been asked where I want to live and work after I graduate from college. People have asked me if I wanted to come back to Charlottesville or try to teach at Charlottesville High School, because that's my plan, to be a teacher. However, as it stands, I will never be able to afford to live in the city where I was born. I will never be able to afford to live in the place where my parents have chosen to raise their children. I will never be able to continue to live in the same city that my friends reside in. This will only continue if you vote yes to these proposed changes to the dairy market. Thank you.
Thank you. And next online,
We have Jenny Keller.
Ms. Keller. Ms. Keller, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us? Because we're not hearing you at the moment. We heard you long enough to ask if we could hear you, and we said yes. Well, tell you what, Ms. Keller, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Genevieve Keller, and I've attended 2 meetings about the Preston Avenue SUP. And I do not and cannot speak for the neighborhood, but I applaud their initiative to speak up and speak out. I live a few blocks to the east, but in a very different neighborhood historically and now. But Preston Avenue, I have determined, in thinking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, is probably the corridor in the city that I actually frequent most, where I'm actually supporting local businesses. It's the place where I get most of my goods and services. And yes, I even use that laundromat. And like a preceding speaker, I remember growing up with the smell of baked bread and buying dry ice or ice cream at the dairy. I ask that you ensure that any new project in that corridor respect the neighbors, and that it also retains the true neighborhood commercial that probably serves 5 to 6 nearby neighborhoods right now, while also supporting nonprofit mental health and legal services, and not just cafes, expensive boutiques, and upscale apartments. Tonight's commitment and fervor for preserving a culturally distinct, historically Black neighborhood and its environs should resonate in your minds as you ponder how to mitigate the unintended consequences baked into the zoning ordinance draft that you will ask the PC to recommend back to you in 100 days. Over those 100 days, plus the month or so after you get it back, please think about other similar projects that might repeat this scenario again and again by the enabling of a new ordinance that preferences by right development, ostensibly for affordability and equity, but what will that 10% affordable really look like? Amidst 10 to 12-story buildings, who will actually feel welcome and included in those units? Think about height. Think about commercial in or next to residential. Think about which tools you could use to actually preserve those identified sensitive areas and our already designated historic and conservation districts. And think about how entrance corridors and special use permits allow dialogue like we've heard tonight. Both are tools that the consultants have discouraged being part of the public process because they are discretionary and take too much time. Time and discretion can be good things, as we've seen tonight. I'm heartened that there are some chinks in the armor of the trickle-down theory of affordability. And thank you so much to the city manager for engaging in this dialogue. I still have some confidence that as it appears we are rushing to the finish line on the zoning ordinance, that we might still make some adjustments and get things closer to right and not just by right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. Next, someone here in person. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to speak because I'm working with the campaign.
I'm sorry, you will need to tap the microphone there, the little red part on the bottom. Tap that so it goes green. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Okay.
can. Can you tell us who you
I'm
are?
here. What?
Can you tell us who you are?
Oh, my name is Nia Bryant. I live
Okay.
here in Charlottesville.
Okay.
I'm working with the campaign to respect the neighbors, and I'm in fully support of that, and I hope that you all can say no. But I would like to say that, Mr. Wade, it's very disrespectful that you're sewing. I watched several black women come up and speak, and you were still sewing as they spoke. So that's disrespectful. Even if you're not engaged in what we have to say, you can put it down for a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Next, someone online.
We have Robin Hoffman once again.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yeah, so I wanted to just add that the churches that I've been invited to by Open Source Recycling, which is also a nonprofit here, especially they're helping a lot of people in those churches to learn computers and build robots, and they're doing amazing things. So anyway, they invited me to the churches, and there's a lot of conversation about how to get grants and things to build the roofs to begin with for solar. But what I want to say is that people are hard pressed to get directives from the city. So I sort of sent them to the Chamber of Commerce and to try to get some help in writing grants and that sort of thing. But I feel like there could be better outreach to people who are trying to get their houses and buildings and churches to have solar, which is free now by Dominion. So I got mine in 2 hours. And I want to say that the church is qualified and that it could be done in 2 hours. It would save them $80,000 a year in utilities. So that's crazy money. This is why I'm pressing that issue. And that also the idea of having the parks in the city as opposed to Darden Park. It's stark how Parks and Rec are just not keeping up the lawns and the usability and the ADA and all that sort of stuff. I'm surprised because I go to the senior softball every Tuesday and Thursday, and that park is wonderful, and the county people there are very organized about it. So I'm not sure what the problem is, but that would help a lot of people if you got those churches supported because they help a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Next, somebody else here in person? Yeah? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Trinity Hughes. I'm born and raised in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I kind of wanted to talk about some of what the West Haven neighborhoods have been talking about when we've been having meetings. One resident had said something about the being blocked in with sunlight. And as some may know, with sunlight, you get serotonin. And, those things help regulate, like, your mood. When you're not getting any sun and those things, that can lead to anxiety, depression, and other things, anger. And I think that's a really important part as we talk about, like, mental health. I also would like to talk about the traumatic things that people have been talking about, the mold, the rats, and those things in those neighborhoods, and how we talk about building more apartments, but what about the apartments that are the places that are already here and need the support of no mold and no rats? And I really would like for you all to kind of think about that when we're talking about them getting a permit and those type of things. And I would hope y'all would listen to all the neighborhoods who have already come forward and talked about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Okay. Next, back to online. Anyone online?
We have Katrina Turner.
All right, Ms. Turner?
Katrina Turner, Charlottesville. First, I want to say that I totally support Diana Bryant and respect the neighborhood. This man, Chris Henry, does not even live in the country, but he feels that he can come to Charlottesville and make decisions on how people should be living here. It seems like you all just do not care about the people who can't really support themselves in affordable housing. There's so much zoning to build all these breweries, the hotels, motels, all these fancy apartment buildings for the rich white folk, but you're forgetting about us. And then this man has a nerve to put Black women on a building that we can't even afford to live in. That's a slap in the face of this Black community. Lloyd, I don't know if you remember that little comment you made about people moving in the county and being bused into the city. I guess your little whatever it was that you foreseen in the future, I guess that's coming to pass. Because the Black community is being forced out of the city. And you all need to do something to stop this. But I guess you don't care because you have money in your pocket. You don't have to worry about anything. And one more thing, you know this is August 12th is coming up. What are you going to do about August the 12th? Because this city has let us down for 6 years. What are you going to do for the people that stood up for this community? Because nothing still has happened. We are literally walking the path from 6 years ago, being August 11th being on Friday, August 12th being on Saturday. What are you going to do to support this community this week? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Next, somebody here in person. Good, yes.
Good evening. My name is Deanna McDonald. I am a resident of Albemarle County. I am here before you in solidarity with the Respect the Neighbors Coalition and my family members that live in the 10th and Page neighborhood. I am here out of responsibility to head and heart. Last week, I buried my 93-year-old uncle who lives in the county, who founded ball clubs out in the county. And then a white man came in and bought the ball field and refused to let Black people play on that field. That's a history and a lineage that I come from. My great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and his father before him helped to build the railroad that comes through Charlottesville to bring economic development. They could not afford to live in the city. They now have families that are here and live and are trying to thrive here. I am also before you as a clinician in this community. I am here to speak about key determinants, social determinants of health. That is social and community context, economic stability, and neighborhood and built environment. We are asking alongside this community. City Council not support the next phase of Dairy Central on the basis of size, affordability, cultural incompetence, and lack of health equity. The proposed size and height to those structures that effectively wall in and hide the community behind them are problematic, to say the least. The design presented portrayed Black images as the faceplate of a building that a large part of the Black community, as you have heard, particularly those in the immediate surrounding area, cannot afford. This is no less than false advertising. And while I appreciate Stony Point's and Chris Henry's statements about revisiting the decision, the fact that it occurred exemplifies his company's and his blatant disrespect, appropriation, and deliberate misleading implication and endorsement of the Black community. The proposed building is not in the middle of a booming business district, but rather encroaching on a neighborhood. The impact on the neighborhood property values alone is a setup for further displacement of low and middle income families due to higher rents and property taxes. More to the point of affordability, Chris Henry himself very eloquently stated that his project costs money, and that if the Black community that it encroaches upon wants to use or utilize those facilities, that those costs will be deferred to them, an aging and already an economically burdened community. That makes no sense here. Lastly, there has been a conversation about affordable housing as it relates to this project. I offer that the standard of affordability being used does not include or support the surrounding community. What is needed in this area is equitable housing, which is diverse, quality, physically accessible, affordable housing choices with access opportunities and services and amenities enabling undeserved minorities necessary shelter as defined by most culturally competent governmental policymakers.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Your time is more than up.
One final thing. I ask that the City Council revisit its engagement and commitment to the community as it relates to basic human needs, safe, decent housing, and viable neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Next, someone online.
We have Ben Heller.
Mr. Heller?
Hi, Ben Heller, Charlottesville resident. Let me first say I agree with all the commenters tonight who said that Dairy Market Phase 3 is inappropriately tall and bulky and shades the neighborhood. I think that's indisputable. And I hope you'll find a way to get Stony Point to reduce the height and bulk, though the draft of the new ordinance would not seem to leave you many options to do so, as Mr. Payne accurately pointed out. But I find it ironic that many of the activists protesting tonight are the same people who cheerled the flum and continue to advocate for a maximalist zoning ordinance. The rank hypocrisy of LAJC and Click is particularly galling, although it may be so extreme as to come around the bend all the way to being comic. To object to massive development on any number of solid practical grounds is, by their lights, a NIMBY outrage. But somehow they simultaneously claim that the psychic trauma allegedly inflicted on their clients by having to pass in close proximity to expensive alfresco dining should be grounds to block 400 apartments. I mean, if Tom Wolfe were writing a Charlottesville novel, you'd say that's almost too on the nose. Leaving the comic hypocrisy of LAJC aside, the earnest and felt comments of citizens tonight follow nearly verbatim the monetary predictions of those of us who have trepidations about upzoning. We said it would lead not to affordable apartments and 8-unit infill projects in Greenbrier. Rather, we said the city would get tall luxury buildings in central areas. We would see increased tax assessments, putting pressure on adjacent lower income homeowners. We'd see gentrification. It's a further irony that this discussion about Dairy Market is happening on the very night you're referring the DZO back to the Planning Commission. Now, frankly, if you believe that any new supply helps relieve pressure on housing prices, you should support Dairy Market Phase 3. Draft zoning ordinance opponents have said luxury doesn't meaningfully help with housing affordability and can in fact hurt, but nobody in power and no activists listened to us when it was a theoretical discussion. Now it's a concrete question. Figuratively, and I suppose literally too. If one believes the simplistic economics 101 framework that underlies the DZO, well, one must admit then this is nearly a perfect project by that framework. 400 apartments, that's 2 years of typical citywide production. No people displaced, asphalt and low-value commercial the only stuff replaced, on a major arterial, on bus lines, walking distance to job centers. So I invite you to be consistent. Either the DZO needs revision and Dairy Market 3 gets pared back, or they should go forward together. We have enough hypocrisy from the activist community. We don't need any more from council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heller. Next, anybody in person? Let's see. Yes, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Catherine Edwards. I'm a resident of the 10th and Page neighborhood. My husband and I moved there 17 years ago, and we have 4 kids who have only ever known Anderson Street as home. We love our neighborhood. We love our neighbors. We feel indescribably thankful to call our neighbors family and friends. It's a kindness and a grace to have been allowed in as we have. My kids know that Uncle Woody is 2 doors down and will spoil them with anything they ask for. They get hand-me-down clothes and toys from Charlotte as her granddaughter outgrows them. We know that Barbara's great-grandkids will be on our porch to play with my kids most weekends. We take care of each other's pets, collect each other's mail. We take care of each other's kids. And neighborhood members know everyone who I'm talking about because this is a neighborhood that knows each other, like James Bryant said, and looks out for each other. And we've tried to be a part of that. The arrival of the Dairy Market has changed our neighborhood in many ways. Aesthetically, we used to look out our back windows and see some rooftops and a lot of sky. Now we see a bank of apartment windows, and we're always slightly unsure of how much of us they can see from their view. It's like living in a fishbowl. I don't like it, and I don't wish it on my neighbors a block over if the expansion happens. My understanding is that neighbors in West Haven do not like this either. As property values have changed and taxes have gone up, due in large part to the Dairy Market, we've also said goodbye to neighbors. The family across the street from us preceded us in the neighborhood by several years. They ran their family business out of their home, and our kids were great friends. They would have loved to continue living in their home. But as the Dairy Market was being built, their home was sold to a house flipper and turned over quickly to another family for roughly $500,000. The new homeowners live in Northern Virginia, and they come down for the occasional UVA basketball game, and the house sits empty the majority of the year. It's really sad, that's an understatement, that our old neighbors could not afford to remain in what was their home for over 2 decades. And it's laughable that they could have just moved to the affordable housing and Dairy Market. I grew up around a lot of dairy farmers who could not keep up with property costs and taxes. Many dairy farmers who had been farming for generations needed to sell their property to developers at some point. I grieved this growing up, as I grieved the development of the Dairy Market in the 10th and Page neighborhood, because once the property is gone, it is gone forever. Once the neighbors are displaced, that community cannot just be recobbled together. I asked some of my neighbors for their thoughts on the Dairy Market expansion. These are Black neighbors who were born on our block and have been there for 6 or 7 decades, and their voices are much more important than mine. Here's what they had to say. That place should have never been built in the first place. It doesn't do me any good. I can't afford anything there anyway. It's a monstrosity. It looks horrible and makes everyone's taxes go up. I oppose the Dairy Market expansion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Next person online.
We have Andrea Massey.
Ms. Massey?
Yes. Hi, thank you, City Council. I'm Andrea Massey. I'm a Charlottesville City resident. I first want to say thank you to the many Black women who spent their precious time organizing us tonight in the Respect the Neighborhood campaign and work. It is work they should not still have to be doing, but here we are again. When does this end? And what can we collectively now do to stop this particular project from moving forward as currently designed? As Councilor Payne brought up, the zoning rewrite is happening now. And I just still have a lot of questions about it, as many meetings as I have been in about this, and what tools are available to stop this from happening. I know we had talked about sensitive area overlays, and I'm not sure how that fits into this, but we'll be finding out again after this meeting. And as many meetings that I have been to, as we all know, this issue is very complicated, as I believe it was designed to be, to keep a lot of voices out of the process. And as we just heard from someone, not sure, who's talking about Click and activist, I want to be very, very clear. Click and activists, so-called I don't even know what, are looking for ways to increase density in R1 neighborhoods that had racial covenants to prevent segregation and affordable housing for Black community members and prevent the further gentrification of historically Black neighborhoods. Not wanting to develop this particular development is not at all hypocritical. We are looking for ways to do both things. You can do both things at the same time if we use our collective energy to do that and can figure out the tools that would let us do so. I want to prevent further gentrification from happening now and going forward. I'd like us to be able to work together in a way that does that, and for City Council to use your collective information and all the information you have to give people that are trying so hard to do both things, to increase density and affordable housing in R1 neighborhoods and to prevent further gentrification in historically Black neighborhoods. We have to find a way to do both. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Massey. Next in person. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Hi, I'm Triana Hughes. I'm a resident of Charlottesville. I'm also a teacher in Charlottesville City Schools. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Clark. I love my job. I'm so proud to be a teacher in the city. I'm so honored every day that I step into the building and I'm with my students. But a lot of times on the long way home, I think a lot about how one day I want to have a family here and I want to live here and I want to stay here. And how proud I am to want to stay here and be here. Because this community that I'm a part of has just helped me in so many ways and built me up to the person I am today. It saddens me to see what's going on in the city. It saddens me to see us have to spend so much of our time as Black women coming together and having to organize and spend so much of our time talking about this. It saddens me that we meet and we talk and we have to console each other and love on each other so much because of just how much we have a heartache because of the things that are going on in this city. It's hard for me to just think about how I already feel that I'm being pushed out of the city. That as a teacher, I don't know if there's many affordable places that I can really say I would personally want to put my money into and invest to live in, because it just seems like it's just insane to pay some of these prices that I see. It's sickening to see when I look at listings, people say, don't even try to apply to live here. We only want students to live here. It sickens me to see how people prioritize people coming in, but don't care about the people who are here, the people who need help, the people who are living in conditions that are poor. It saddens me. And so really, to the people who are listening and hear my voice, I just ask that you think about the privilege that you have. Think about how some people in this city are able to go home and not have to think about these things and they can go to bed at night. Because I know for many years, I try not to look at the news. I try not to look at social media. Sometimes I try to act like none of these things are going on because I don't know how much of my sanity I can preserve. And so I just ask that if you have resources, if you have time, that you help free up some of the time of some of these Black women that are putting a lot of their time on the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Next, anyone online still?
We have Joy Johnson.
Ms. Johnson?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joy Johnson. I reside at 808C Hardy Drive. And I did not hear earlier what the previous residents have said. So if I say the same thing, please excuse me. I had to take care of my special need grandson before I get on here. Number one, Chris Henry have lied to this community before. Chris Henry have lied to this community before. The historical church that he promised in a room full of 10th and Page neighborhood folks, that church will become a community center. He came back to you all and changed that. And now it's just a space that nobody in the neighborhood can afford except UVA students who are getting married. The traffic in the neighborhood on West Street is horrible. Someone talked about Jefferson Park Avenue in the traffic study. Did the city do a traffic study on West Street? Probably not. Number next, Chris Henry promised the neighborhood that there would be affordable housing. Even with a voucher, they didn't qualify to live in the small space from what I'm hearing. For Chris to now bring this Phase 3 building, and for everybody who don't know, he also owns across the street, Preston Plaza. So with me knowing that he owned Preston Plaza, what I'm seeing is that it's not just the 10th and Page neighborhood that is going to be blocked in, but it is also going to be the Rose Hill neighborhood. So even if the Rose Hill Neighborhood Association is not watching this, they better watch it, because I've learned, me today, you tomorrow, 10th and Page today, Rose Hill tomorrow. Let me carry on for my time run out. Oh, it's getting ready to run out. Do not support, I beg you, do not support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Next in person. Yes?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Lewis, and I just want to say I support the Respect Your Neighbors campaign, and I want you guys to listen to their concerns and vote no when the time comes. Please do not vote yes for the phases 3 and 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Anyone online?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
All right. Anyone else in person who would like to speak? Seeing no additional hand. Oh, here's an additional hand. There we go.
My name is Leslie Lowry. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. I just want to say that I am opposed to the expansion to Dairy Market, and I stand with the residents of the surrounding 10th and Page neighborhood. Expansion of Dairy Market would potentially displace longtime residents as a result of higher rents, elevated property taxes, and the general unaffordability of living in the vicinity of Dairy Market. This type of development favors profit over people. We have seen this happen time and time again. Honestly, I don't even know why 10th and Page isn't considered a historic neighborhood and given historic status and therefore protected, rather than being turned into yet another dystopian and cruel high-rise wasteland. Please say no to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowry. Anyone else appearing online?
There are no additional hands.
Anybody else in person who would like to speak? Okay, so we will close this public hearing, the community matters part. Council, anything we need to do before adjournment? Let me just say thank you to all who spoke. I appreciated the fact that even though I occasionally had to cut some folks off, that they abided by that decision. It's obviously we had a lot of chance, a lot of people to speak. We had a total of 32 people speak to us today, and it takes a lot of cooperation from everybody to be able to let that many people have their piece. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.